incident management, and really when you talk about IT service management in general, the statement I've always made to customers is that it's 80% process, 20% technology. And so it's really important that those two are married well. And I think one of the best things that Footprints has to offer is a visual workflow designer to do that. So with that, let me go ahead and exit out of the PowerPoint. I don't want to spend a lot of time in PowerPoint today just because our time is brief. But let's start off by looking at the incident record, and so specifically, you're seeing the home console here for a service desk staff member. And just keep in mind that all of this is configurable. So, you know, the list that you're seeing, or what we refer to as widgets, all of that is customizable and configurable. But if we were to create a new incident, we'd just simply select our new incident button, and then from there, we'd have the option of completing our incident form. So we'd start with our description. So we might say something like, email is slow, and identify our impact. So because this is slow, this is a relatively low impact, but email as a service that we provide our customers, on the other hand, is I would consider that to be a high urgency, because it does have quite a bit of an importance to the organization. And then with that, we can then provide our description in more detail. So can't seem to send emails. Having a hard time here typing. So with that, that's given us enough information. We also want to identify who the customer is. In this case, it's Sally. So we'll link Sally's information. Notice that I did not populate all of Sally's information, so we're just querying, partial searches against the address book, and so Sally's information is here. Let's go ahead and save this record, and a couple of things I want to point out. So as I save the record, as I save that, a couple of things. One of which is our service level agreements that can be applied to the record, and let's try this again. Let's choose a different urgency, and so a couple of things to note. So as we look at different records that we have. Here I've got one that's already opened and that I was testing with earlier. So as we look at this record, a couple of things that you'll notice is that, one, a service level agreement will be applied to the record, and that's in the form of what we refer to as a work target. So if we go here to our linked records, we can see the work target link control, and a couple of SLAs were applied. First of all, there are two types of SLAs that we can define within the application, one of which is a resolution time, the other is a response time. So as you define your SLAs, and I'll kind of walk you through that here in just a moment, just note that you have those two. Personally, I'm not a big fan of response times, just because as soon as this incident is created, we could certainly send an email to the customer giving them confirmation that the record was created, and that's really a response time, right? I mean, we're responding to the customer's request. So I think probably more importantly, customers are interested in knowing that you resolve it within a timely fashion, so that's where the resolution time type of SLA and work target is more appropriate. The other thing I wanted to touch on is the time spent. So I know that some organizations do chargebacks, but that's probably not as many as those who don't. But the idea is that even if you're not doing chargebacks, it is important to track the time that you're spending, the actual resolution time, not just the time that it takes to open up a record to the point of closure, right? But more importantly, the level of effort. So There's a few different ways that we can track that time in Footprints, one of which is an automated fashion where it will attempt, as I save the record, you might notice this scrolling or this ticking clock in the upper right-hand corner, counting down. So as I save the record, it's going to make entries here. But more importantly, I can add. So if I were to, work on this incident, I might say, researched issue. And with that, I can add my hours and minutes. So if I only spent 45 minutes doing that, in addition, we're going to go ahead and add our time. Now, I've already entered the time. Okay. Notice, though, that and that time will be recorded against the record and stored down here, as you can see, but I didn't choose a billing rate. And that's based upon who the staff is. Now, I can choose an hourly rate associated to each and every staff, and at that point, I can then begin to calculate costs associated with supporting customers. So something like this is absolutely important and useful for external support if you're doing chargebacks to your customers, but also even internally. In a lot of cases, what I've seen from customers is that they will, for example, track the time and then use just a standard across-the-board rate for all staff members, and then they will use that for financial justification in terms of what it's costing to support different services and different applications within your organization. So two key things I think that any organization can implement as it relates to incident management, one of which is the time tracking and financial tracking of the efforts spent within an incident, and then in addition to that, defining service level agreements where our work targets are calculated, and ultimately what this means is that this is a means of making sure that we respond to our customers in a timely fashion and resolving the incidents as we have as we've defined with our service level agreement. So let's take a look at a couple of things before I go into the next topic, and that's the Graphical Workflow Designer. So as we look here in our service portfolio, this is actually where our service level agreements are defined. And so as you're looking at this, this is a graphical display of our service catalog, which is useful, but if we want to actually see our service agreements, then we can simply view that through one of the views, and you'll notice that we have service level targets, services, and then work targets. These are all three components of the SLA module. So obviously our service are the services that we support, and the service level agreement is that agreement that we have with our customer that defines what our resolution and response times are. And then the work target is what you saw a moment ago on the incident. So it is the record that gets calculated when the incident is created and it finds a match based upon our service level agreements or service level targets and the services. So once there's a match, these work targets are created and associated to the incident. Okay, so let's take a look at one of these service level targets, and we'll start off here with this first record, or record number 1, just so you have an idea. And basically we're saying the name of this, I've referred to it as P08, and this is a resolution SLA. So let me explain a little bit. And so I'm incorporating some functionality within the application, but I'm also trying to incorporate some discussions around best practices. And so you'll notice that I refer to this as P08. Traditionally, most organizations will, simply state priority 1, priority 2, priority 3, 4, and so forth and so on, right? Well, P08, in my mind, is a little bit more telling, and that 08 is indicating that we have 8 hours to resolve this incident, okay? So we might have a P1 or P01 for 1 hour, a P04 for 4 hours, 08, 16, 32, 40, so forth and so on. You get the idea. But the idea is that it's just more telling, right? A P1 doesn't tell me anything in terms of how much time I have to actually resolve it. So just knowing that it's a P01, I know that I have an hour. So again, this P08 represents 8 hours, which is defined here in our target value. And you can see the units. Now, the choices that you have in the Footprints version 12 are weeks, days, hours, and even minutes, right? So we might have 30 minutes or something to that effect. Then we can define some schedules that this SLA will be applied to. This is the normal work week, and that is important because basically if we get a call at 4:30 in the afternoon and we were going to apply this P08 resolution SLA, well, only 30 minutes of Friday would count if we're only going to 5 o'clock. And then the remaining time would be calculated in the following day, assuming that we're not working past 5 o'clock in Saturdays and Sundays, right? So defining your schedule is important there. Also, we have our fulfillment threshold percentages. So these are basically the amount of time or when the notification. So we're saying that notification and fulfillment thresholds in terms of percentages, this is saying basically when we're going to start sending out notifications to individuals and alerting that there is that we may be going beyond this SLA if we don't quickly resolve it. So there are some of the nuances with defining the service level target, and so you'll notice here that also that this target, the type of target, is a resolution time. So if you look closely, if we go back to my service level targets, we have different types. We have response and resolution SLAs. So if we look here at 2, so this is again a resolution. Here is an example of a response SLA. So the idea is that we're looking, when we assign a priority to a record, which in this case is a P40, well, then our response time is 40 hours, and so with that, we then begin to define our thresholds. Okay, so hopefully you can use this information as a means of designing SLAs within your implementation of version 12. The next thing that I'd like to cover, and to me is probably one of the most exciting features of version 12. So I'm going to switch over to an administrative console so you can see this functionality, and it's the Graphical Workflow Designer. So as we log in as an administrator, one of the things, we'll go over to our IT Service Desk workspace. Here we have different record types in that same workspace. So we have incidents, we have problems, we have service requests. And then with that, if we drill down into one of these items, and let's look specifically at the service request item. And the reason I'm choosing this one, it's very common that we will have approval processes associated with this. So I want to give you an idea of what this would look like. Now, traditionally, if you're coming from older versions of Footprints, version 11.6 and before, or if you were coming from another product like Service Desk Express, you would simply have a number of business rules that were created, and you had to be pretty keen on how you design those rules, as well as the naming conventions that you use, so that you could kind of understand what was happening or what would happen during the incident process.